Welcome back, everyone. This story was written by ScaryStories, and it is titled Flickering Lights. It could be found under the subreddit of r/ScaryStories, and it is to be narrated by yours truly, Bishop Phonix. Ted takes the same route to work every day. Actually, he eats the same breakfast, drinks out of the same mug, says the same "good morning" to his cat, and forever lives with the regret of avoiding any risks presented to him in life, leading to a draining and frankly boring existence. But today was different. Ted was going to make a change. Instead of taking a right on Cherry Avenue on the way to his night shift, he took the scenic route and took a left on King Street. The dark, quiet houses, lit up by the glow of the street lamps, seemed nothing but textbook for Ted's midnight drive to his overnight shift, until something caught his eye. One house had porch lights that seemed to be malfunctioning, flickering on and off in an unorganized fashion. At first, Ted didn't think twice about it. He's used to driving through neighborhoods with imperfect houses. But there was something about the flickering that intrigued him, and he wanted to know more. Ted rolled to a stop, turned his car around, and stationed himself outside the house with the light problem. The flickering continued, and didn't seem like it was going to stop anytime soon. Ted had his confirmation. It was just a faulty set of lights, but for whatever reason, he was fixated on the pattern of this flickering. It didn't seem like a random malfunction. It seemed to be repeating. It seemed to be repeating in the same pattern over and over again. He thought it could be some kind of code. A code with a message. But no, this would be ridiculous. Ted knew he wasn't crazy, and this was a crazy idea. But he couldn't just drive away. That's what the old Ted would have done. The new Ted was going to rule out this ridiculous possibility and any other theory he had until he was satisfied. Only then he would drive away. And so he began, sitting there in the dark, his car illuminated by the ominous glow of the dingy street lamp he was parked under. Ted kept his eyes fixated on the repeating pattern of the flickering lights. Suddenly, he remembered taking this one class back in high school about how military professionals used a form of communication known as Morse code. He remembered learning how each letter has its own code, and how there were many methods to communicate these patterns. One of these methods was the use of flashing lights. He knew how it sounded, but he needed to be sure. Ted pulled out his phone and quickly found a chart that showed the translation from Morse code to letters in the alphabet. One by one, Ted began checking if the patterns on the chart matched the pattern of the lights. A was a no. So was B. He started to feel like he was just wasting his time, until he got to E. E was a match. A pause, one flash, then another pause before continuing the pattern. Sure, one letter matched, but it easily could be a coincidence. He decided to keep going after writing the E down on the piece of scrap paper. The next letter that matched was H, then L, then P. Ted stared at the letters on his paper and then at the flickering lights. It didn't take long for Ted to organize the letters into an order that they were being flashed. Help, 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 it read. over and over again in a robotic fashion. This suddenly became very real for Ted. This wasn't a delusion. This was really happening. Somebody in that house needed help for whatever reason. Ted was terrified, but he knew he had to do something. After staring at the lights for a few more minutes, he had gathered up the courage to investigate. He stepped out into the night and began walking towards the front door of the house, only having a clear view of it during the code flashes of the porch light. Once in front of the door, he took a deep breath and knocked. No response. He rang the doorbell. No response. Ted stood under the flashing lights, perplexed. He put his ear to the door. He heard the sound of a light switch being flicked on and off through the old wooden door. Ted felt chills down his spine. He wanted to run, but he had to know who was doing this and why. Without thinking too much about it, he opened the door and stepped inside. The house was dark. There wasn't a single light on inside. The noise was coming from his right side. He quickly turned his head to face who was behind all this, and he froze. His eyes opened wider than he thought possible, and his mouth opened more than it should have. Tears began streaming down his face, and he couldn't make a sound if he wanted to. Ted lost track of how long he was in this position, and it didn't really matter, because there was something else Ted needed to do. Finally, he understood and accepted. His facial expression returned to normal. He turned around and left. Once in his car, he took one last glance at the house to see that the flickering light was now off, and the house was finally dark again. On the drive home, Ted didn't think much about anything. He was focused. He was on a mission. Once in his driveway, he hurried his way inside, not even bothering to close the car door behind him. His house was dark, no lights on, and he intended to keep it that way. He grabbed a chair and placed it directly in front of the light switch, right next to his door. Ted sat down and began staring at the light switch. He slowly extended his arm and began turning his porch light on and then off in a distinctive pattern. His unblinking eyes focused on the light switch, and with sweat dripping down his face, Ted flashed the letters H-E-L-P continuously. He has no plans of stopping. He wouldn't if he wanted to. All he can do now is hope that one day soon, somebody gets curious. This Reddit story has some interesting parallels where it is almost similar to the movie It Follows, where the individuals in the stories, they're going about their life and what other habits that they would normally partake in, and they unknowingly and unwillingly enter into an inherited curse that they have to continue until they pass it on to the next victim. I hope you enjoyed this content, guys. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe for more of it. Stay safe out there, guys.